show you how to do it sort of on a larger scale with some stuff that's ridiculously heavy for doing whipping, but it'll be easier for you to see. There's a few ways of doing it, but here's one way that I like. Give yourself a little bite here, a little loop, and the idea is that, I guess we'll go this way. I'm going to leave myself a little bit here to be able to pull with, and this loop here is going to wind up capturing the end. Let me just show you quickly how it works. We're going to wrap over top of the line, and I'm not going to do this terribly tightly here, just to make it easier to finish. When you're actually doing whipping, I basically pull this as hard as I can to make it as rock solid as possible. So I'm basically just winding this along towards the loop. Once I get towards the loop, just put this end through, and you can see now that as I pull on the standing end, the loop constricts and it captures this piece. And just keep a little bit of tension on this one while you pull this loop through. And what I want to do is pull it until it's right in the center. And you'll see it work its way through, and we're roughly at about center now. Just open it up a little bit so you can see. Actually, there it is, right dead center. So by pulling this very tightly as you're putting these windings on, it really squeezes in on this piece of rope, and it prevents either end from coming out. So that's just a basic way of doing a whipping. We'll finish by applying a whipping here so that things can't unravel, and then trim the ends, and we're basically done with a nice little decorative splice. So I'll just get myself a little bit of whipping twine, and this is waxed, I think it's polyester twine. And let's get myself enough to be able to do about a 3/8 length of whipping. And the reason why 3/8 is I'm using 3/8 rope, and just sort of for aesthetics, the rule of thumb is the whipping should be about as long as the rope is wide. But of course, I mean, suit your own taste. If you like it a little wider, it's fine. There's no hard and fast rule for this kind of thing, really. So I'm just forming a loop here, and I'm going to start whipping just about where these strands exit the rope, so that they're held snugly down. I'll give it a good pinch with my thumb. Give it a turn around, and once I've given it one or two turns, then I can start to pull on it. And what's going to happen is that these strands here are going to spread out and sort of form right around the rope and encompass it nicely. So hopefully we won't have any lumpy bits or anything. It should be nice and smooth. So now that I've got a few turns on there, I'll start pulling it a little bit harder as I go. And the idea here with the whipping is for it to each strand to lay right hard up against its neighbor, so there aren't any gaps, and preferably there'll be no threads from the rope underneath it poking out in between the turns of the whipping. Let's continue it along. And if you find that something is poking through or isn't laying very nicely, it's no big deal just to stop and go back a little bit, unravel a little, and give it a try again. Of course, there are a number of different ways of doing whippings. This is kind of my personal favorite one. See, I've got a bit of a gap there, so I'll just go back and lay it down a little bit better. And once I've got the right amount, roughly, a bit of a gap there as well. There we go. Once we've got the right length of whipping, and I think we're getting pretty close to that point, we'll go around once more. Actually, we've wound up with just about the perfect length of whipping twine used here. Once we get to where we want to stop, and of course I could have stopped a bit earlier if I had a longer length of twine, just have the last piece come up through the loop, and that loop, as we pull this end bit now, is going to constrict and grab a hold of that end piece and pull it right underneath the whipping. And pull it until it's right in the center, and we're just about there now. And once it's in the center, you're essentially done. You can trim the edges. Where'd my knife go? You can trim the ends, just being careful not to cut the rope. And that's basically how it goes. Last thing to do is just to carefully trim the ends off here. Sometimes you may find it easier to leave a little bit extra and then melt the bits in, or get a pair of scissors to finish. I'm just going to do this fairly quickly. You can, if you take your time, you can trim this very flush to the whipping and not have to do anything further. But you don't really need to see me sitting here fiddling with this for another 5 minutes. So we'll just sort of trim this roughly out, and trimming it roughly like this, I just take the hot knife and melt these back, and then it would be in there fairly permanently. So there's an eye splice onto thimble with a decorative double wall and crown knot, finished with a whipping.